Okay, well, sounds like there's a lot of people in a lot of different places across the country, so I hope this is reasonably relevant to everybody. First of all, I just want to say that I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be any kind of expert on gardening, but I've done a few decades of it. But I just like, I think it's great that every gardener I speak to has got a different thing that they do well and can't do other things, and I'm the same. And I think it's great to just swap about some ideas, and we'll all learn from it. So this is kind of a personal view of some aspects of what I do on the allotment, which might be helpful. So I'd just like to start by talking a little bit about why we do this. Somebody said to me recently, "Oh, I don't bother growing onions because they're so cheap in the shops," and I think, well, if you're just growing it to save money, I think it's not a good idea, really. I mean, you might save a bit of money doing it if you don't take any account of your hours, but if you're looking just to save money or make money or something, there's lots of other ways that are much better. But what I would say is the reasons you do it, or the reasons I do it anyway, well, the first thing is you get quality, really the best quality fresh produce, which tastes better, it's better for you, it's got low food miles, you know where it's come from, it hasn't got some chemical residues on it or whatever, so it's the best. Another thing, the second thing maybe, is really fun, and it's great. There's a great sense of enjoyment to it, a great sense of achievement when you do it. It's a big challenge sometimes with growing something. Some things are easy, some things are not easy, and it's quite a challenge. And so that's good fun, and it keeps you fit and everything as well. And it's also the other thing which is worth remembering is it's really good for wildlife. Looking after a garden and having all these bits and pieces going on. Now, all of these things that you're doing it for are all better if you do it organically. That's the first thing I would say, because those things just work better if you're doing it organically. And I know some people think, well, it's too difficult to do it organically, or it's too much of a challenge. But I've never really thought of it like that. I always just think it's a thing I want to do. It's like I don't want to put poison on stuff that I'm going to eat. So I think it's just a good thing to do. And quite often, if you try and do it partly organically, and then you decide, well, I've got far too many caterpillars on my cabbages or something, so I'm going to spray it, or there's too many slugs, I'll have to just put some slug pellets down. You have to be patient, really, because if you do these things, it can be counterproductive. You end up losing. If you spray your caterpillars, you might end up killing toads and some of the birds that eat the things, the robins and the blackbirds, and then of course, if they're all out of the picture, then your caterpillars are going to go stupid next year. So you have to be a bit patient and allow these things to work. And with the garden, it's a slowly, you're building a kind of ecosystem. So it's bound to be a little bit out of balance, and it'll settle into a balance, and you will overcome these things eventually. That's the idea anyway, and it kind of does work. But being organic as well, I think a lot of people think it's just not spraying things and not using chemicals, but actually there's a whole different way of thinking of it, which is Eve Balfour, who started the Soil Association in the 1940s, started out with the premise that healthy people come from healthy food, which comes from healthy soil. So the basics of organic is looking after your soil, making sure your soil is really healthy. There's I heard recently that there's more microbes in a handful of good soil than there are human beings on the planet. It's healthy soil is really really important for growing stuff. It's like Americans sometimes call it dirt. Well, it's not dirt. It's a whole ecosystem, and it's full of creatures and balances and checks and things are going on. And the more you can make it like that, the more it's going to produce, and the more healthy the things are, and the more they'll be more pest resistant as well if the plants are healthy. So yeah, I mean, look after the soil, and the way I do that mainly is dung, seaweed, compost from making my own compost. So those kind of things, healthy soil, get it all growing, and so on. There's the allotment. I hope you can all see that. So I'm fairly conventional in that I don't use raised beds or anything. I just grow everything in rows like they used to in the old days. Partly because I kind of like the look of it, and it's kind of efficient with space. But anyway, what I was going to talk about really is, it's quite easy to grow some nice green stuff in the middle of the summer and have it all, and have plenty of food then. But the real challenge is to grow stuff that you can eat around the year. If you want to make a real impact on your diet and what you're eating, and a real contribution to that, you need to be able to have stuff off your allotment or garden to be edible all year round. So maybe the next picture. So what I'm thinking about is looking at that's just the same bit from the other direction, really. I think it's a different year actually, but you can see it's just rows of different things. I lost my thread. It was what was I saying? Yeah, to keep it all going round the year. And there's lots of things that are either storable or will just keep growing all year. So I thought I'd go through some of those things. And particularly in the northwest, we're looking at stuff that puts up with quite a hostile environment. So I thought we'd go through things. Then, if you put on the next picture, this is just a little aside, which I'll come back to. This is one way of avoiding work. Digging isn't great because you're disturbing the soil. So I tend to fork over the soil a little bit and fork in manure and things, but try not to just get a spade in there and dig it over too much. I don't really do that at all. So this is the key. This is a stuff called Mypex. So you can have any kind of covering. I think there's various makes, but it's basically a light stopping cover. So you can see on the left there's weeds. It's gone mad with weeds. And on the right, I've just pulled the Mypex back, and you can see what it's like underneath. If you just put when I've finished growing something and it's full of weeds, and I've taken all the onions out or whatever it is, and there's lots of weeds about, I just cover it, and then when I want to use it next, I uncover it, and it looks like that underneath, and it's just ready to go. So I don't need to worry about weeds really. When between things, yes, when it needs weeding, when there's something growing, yeah, there's a bit of weeding to do, but that just saves a lot of problems. And the other thing about that is, especially when you're starting out, if you've got a new allotment or whatever, and it's just grass, and you've got to dig out all those roots and stuff to get started, I wouldn't bother. I would just cover a bit to it with this, leave it for 3 months, take it off, and then you can just fork it over or whatever, and it's just ready to go. So that's quite an important part of the whole process, really, for me. So anyway, I'll go on to the next picture, and I'll talk about some of the crops. I'm starting with peas. That's my peas this year, which is people always like to look at the peas because they look quite impressive. Part of the thing with them is I grow tall varieties of peas because really modern varieties are bred for farmers, and farmers like all the peas to be ready at once, so they can crop them at once, and they don't like tall ones because they're more difficult to deal with. So they're looking for short, all ready at once kind of varieties, whereas that's not what we want in the garden. We want flavour. We want a nice, really sweet flavour. So the old varieties are probably better for that. So that's why I grow the tall ones. Now, it takes for a row like that, it'll take quite a lot of seed packets. So what I do, rather than buying millions of seed packets, is I mark off about 2 yards of the end of the row there, and then I just leave those peas on the plant and let them dry. Now, I was a bit late this year, and the mice got quite a lot of them. But basically, if you let them dry, I've got some here actually. I don't know if you can see that. They're just dried off, and probably can't see that. But anyway, I think there's a photograph. There you are. You can maybe see that. I think the next photograph's got them pictures of them dried, or maybe I've spilled them all over the place here. So then I've got, if I've got a bucket like that of seed, it doesn't matter how much I chuck in there. I can over-sow, and it doesn't matter if some of them don't germinate or whatever. There's plenty there, and that's just to show that. There we are. There's a picture of them dry. I just bring them in, shell them, and finish them off in the house. Just make sure they're really dry, and then I put them away. And then there's plenty for next year, and I've got the same variety, which is an old variety. If I can't get it again, then I've still got some. So that's what I do with peas to keep them going, to keep plenty of seed so that I can grow large amounts of the stuff, and that's that. And then peas. Well, I grew a lot of peas originally because everybody in the family likes them, but also because you can stick them in the freezer and they last all the year round. Really, you've got your all year round supply. So they're a fantastic crop, really. So okay, and related to that is beans. The next picture is French beans. Now there they are on the right hand side, starting to grow in the polytunnel. I grow them in the polytunnel. I think you probably grow them in Oxford outside, but not here really. Anyway, those are the French beans starting to grow, and the next picture is them after they've grown a bit, just to show what happens. They grow everywhere. But the nice thing about French beans is if you grow them, you get them a really early start, and you get them out as soon as you dare with the frost, and you get it's really our earliest green crop for a fresh green veg. So, but the same thing I do with the seeds. I let some of them dry out, so they're like this. And I think the next picture is some dried out ones. That's after they've grown a bit more. That's a bit more recent. This is a little diversion there. I'll just take a diversion here. Everything in our polytunnel and quite a lot of the stuff outside gets attacked by voles and mice, and there's a huge number of them in the fields around about, and that's a major problem. So if I plant something in the polytunnel, they'll just take a nip out of the stem and the whole thing keels over, and that's the end of the plant. So I use these you can see me holding one up, or it's in the picture as well, and the second picture's got some more. The next picture's got another view of that on the tomatoes. You can cut them in half. These are just they're called vole guards actually. They're used for trees when people plant out trees in the fields, because the voles attack. They just strip the bark off little plants that people planted out. But they do fine for this. So I've got a stack of these left over from planting schemes in the past. So if anybody local wants any of these, please get in touch, and I'll give you some if they have any problems with mice and voles. You can cut them in half, and you stick them around the plant when you put them in the ground, and the voles can't touch them. So that's really useful. You couldn't grow anything in the polytunnel without these, really. Yeah. So the next picture is the beans dried up, I think. And these are great things. Now, most people are pretty familiar with French beans, which are great green veg to grow, but they are really just the summer. But that's the pod on the left, and two different varieties. Now, and I've got another one here of the same. This is a variety. The black and white one is called pea bean, and I've got some here. And they just let them dry like this, and then rather than pick them, and then you pick them out, and they've got these beans in here, which are And I would leave them in the, like the same with the peas, leave them in a tray in the windowsill until they're nice and dry, and then you can just stick them in a jar. Now, the ones on the left, the black ones, they're just an ordinary French bean. Now, you can eat them dry, but we generally eat those green, but the pea beans are great. There's some varieties that are of French beans that are actually bred for drying, and these are one of them. And you just, when they've dried off, you just dry them off, make sure they're hard and they're not damp anymore, stick them in a jar in the cupboard, and then you can soak them, stick them in a stew or whatever it is, anytime. I mean, they'll last for a couple of years probably. I mean, we use them up before that, but so that's a great thing for around the year, and it's a great thing for eating generally, and it's a kind of thing that people don't really think about. But they're very easy to grow. If you can grow French beans, then you can grow those, you know. And so I grow quite a lot of those. Then the next crop I've got is potatoes, which are, you know, the next photograph is just potatoes. But I mean, everybody's pretty familiar with these, but there's a lot of decisions to make about potatoes, like which variety you want. You want some earlies and some later crop, and there's a lot of reasons for growing different varieties. Now, you know, some are slug resistant, some are blight resistant. There's thousands of diseases they can catch. So if you've got a problem, then you'll find one that's got a resistant variety. There's one variety that's resistant to it. The other thing is you'll find if you start growing a few varieties, you'll find you like some and you don't like others. You know, they've all got different flavors and textures and stuff. So. But what a lot of people do is they chuck them in the ground and then they grow them and then they can't remember what they put in or they can't remember which one was which. So I think it's absolutely key. You can see on the left-hand side of this, the tatty row there, you can see I've put in these labels. Oh, here's one, in fact, right here. I have one here. For Aaron Victory, I just stick, you know, little plastic things with some pen drawn on them. You know, they don't survive 3 months in the ground. So I get a chunk of wood and I paint on it what it is, and then I keep track of them. And then if you know what you've got and which ones are which, you can work out what you want to grow next year. And if you want to grow, and some of them I keep seed back for. Somebody was asking me recently about this. You know, I would keep seed for several reasons. I keep them in trays like this. As soon as I bring in the crop, I pick out the ones, the seed for next year. You want something that's like the size of an egg, and make sure it's completely healthy. There's no dodgy bits on it or bad-looking bits or slug damage or anything like that. So you want that kind of stuff. And I put them in a tray like that, and I put them in the shed, or the porch out of the way of mice, so I've always got some, and you know, only if they're a good crop and it's what I want to keep. And I always try a few different varieties every year to see if there's anything more interesting or better or whatever. And I think it is good to. I think it's pretty good to renew your seed every now and again. I think if you keep it every year, the same seed can degrade a bit. I think so. I think it's worth keeping some back. The other thing about it, keeping some back, is that, like this year, there was big demand for seed potatoes, and some people had a lot of difficulty getting some. But if you've got at least some of it kept back from last year, you're okay. Okay, the next picture is kale, which is an absolute cracker for round the year stuff, and it's really good for you as well. So I grow quite a lot of that, and that's the kale this year. Yeah, I mean, I could just say how I grow that. I just started off in seed trays in this windowsill, and as soon as they're big enough they've got 3 leaves or something, I get them planted out in the polytunnel, and then they can grow up. They won't get too leggy indoors, and I get them outside, and I grow them in the ground in the polytunnel. Oh, that's another thing I might mention is in the polytunnel, I don't grow in bags or boxes or anything like that, because of going back to the organic thing. It's all about the soil for me, and I want to grow in the soil in the polytunnel. You know, it's all about the soil, and the only difference in the polytunnel is that it's protected from the wind and it's got a bit more sun. It's a bit warmer. So yeah, bring the kale on to about this big, and then plant them out. And I usually go far more than I need and put them out, and then I can suffer losses if something comes and eats them. The pigeons get them, or caterpillars destroy them, or there's just a bit of poor ground that they don't grow very well in. It doesn't matter if I've got some more there. And that's how most of the things are. I've got some chard here actually as well, which I might show you. This is quite nice. I just put it in. I just take this out here. I just put that over there. Chard is a cracker as well, because you grow it and like kale, it's ready in about July, but then it'll keep going. In Oxford, it'll keep going right around the year. But up here, it'll probably get bashed up by the winter. So it'll keep going till about November, but then what I do is I dig up a few plants and put them in the polytunnel, and they'll go through a bit, maybe through January and February, but I did get some keeping through till about April last year. And they just grow. I just grow them the same as the kale, little seedlings in the house, plant them out in the polytunnel, and then plant them out. This is a variety which is quite fun called rainbow chard. Now I don't know if you've ever seen a rainbow that colour, but that's what it is, and it's great to cook in all sorts of different things. So that's quite fun. Then I go on to onions. I think there's a picture of the onions there. I've got that's my onions just growing there, pretty standard. The question with onions for most people is, do you grow onion sets or onion seed? And onion sets are definitely easier to grow to start with, but actually if you get the onion seed going early, I get them started in January, and they keep up, and they look, the near ones are onions from onion sets, and the ones behind are from onion seed, and they look a bit further behind, but that's what they're like now. That's the onion seed. That's Ailsa Craig. These are monsters, and that's what those ones have come to. So, onion seed is great, but I tend to grow a bit of both just in case. But again, they're a thing that very easy to grow. There's a bit of weeding to do because they don't cover the ground very well, but they're easy to grow, and you bring them all up. Tie them up in a string, hang them up in the shed, and they'll go through the whole year through till March or something. Well, usually just run out, but they'll start sprouting in March, April. So you've got 3/4 of the year. You've got your own onions. So that's a great thing for around the year. So that's a few of the basic sort of staple crops that I'm growing to try and keep contributing to the diet all the year round. I'll just finish off with a little bit about my orchard, and there's a picture of that next. Now, I think apple trees are absolutely brilliant, and that's what an apple tree can give you. It gives you fruit, and it gives you autumn colour, and it gives you blossom that can look like that. So it's fantastic. They're fantastic things, and once you've got them growing, there's so little work. So I don't know why everybody doesn't have apple trees in their gardens. So if you give me the next picture, there's probably another picture of the apples. Now there's a lot, like potatoes. There's a lot of things to think about with varieties. Do you want early, mid-season, late ones, do you want cookers or eaters? And there's all the different kinds, so you might want different flavors. Some you like, some you don't like. Some are a bit chewier, and some are a bit crunchier, and some are a bit sweeter, and some are, there's all different things. So and then there's the other thing is the root stocks. They're all in different root stocks. So I would definitely not go. I mean, there's a guy I know who just went out and bought the thing that was on offer in the garden centre, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think you're going to live with these for years, so it's worth spending a little bit more and getting the exact varieties that you're interested in, you want, and that are going to do what you want for them. You don't want, for example, you don't want more than one early variety, because you don't want everything ready in August. You want it spread over the autumn, and the later ones keep better as well. So there's that. And somebody once said to me, I can't see the point of cider apples because you can make cider out of any apples. Well, you can, but you do get different flavors. And the other thing about that is the cider apples that I grow are absolutely the best in terms of being healthy and being productive and being consistent. So far and away, the most trouble-free apples are the two cider varieties which I've got. So and you can't eat them, but you can make juice out of them, and you could probably cook with them, and of course you can make cider out of them. So they're fantastic. But yeah, with my orchard, I'd just say that there's different rootstocks that's what the plant is growing on. There's the bit on the top which gives it the type of apple, the variety, and the bit on the bottom which gives it the rootstock, which it's grafted onto, which gives it the size and the size the tree gets to, and how quickly it produces and that sort of thing. They've done heaps and heaps of research about what the best distance apart to get the maximum production is. So I planted all my apple trees with, I think it's 6 meters between them, but with 7 meters between the row or something. So you can see, I think the next picture maybe shows that. And that's just a picture of some nice apples on the tree. I mean, they're priceless. If you know, there's some really nice apples you can get, which you just can't buy in the shops as well. That's another thing about these. Some lovely apples. Like one of the ones I've got is called Lochalsh, which is the most northerly apple variety in Britain. And it's a lovely sort of pineapple flavour, crunchy. You know, you just can't get them in the shops, but they're just fantastic apples. Anyway, what I was going to say about this is our biggest problem with apple trees in the north, or in the west anyway, is canker, because we're living in a damp climate, and it's quite cool. So I decided we need as much air through the trees to keep the damp out of it as possible. So I was cutting the grass short, and then I thought, well, actually, they just really need the grass short around the trees, and there's an awful lot there I could do. It's not great for wildlife, and it's an awful lot of work cutting all that grass. So I thought I'll leave strips in between, as you can see in the photograph, with long grass, and then I'll just cut it like a hay meadow at the end of the year, September, October, and that's great for wildlife because there's a whole lot of stuff in there. So there's a whole lot of insects will be living in there and things like that, pollinators and so forth. So I've done that the last couple of years, and then I decided, well, actually, it would be nice to have, you know, like a wildflower meadow and plant some wildflowers, some sort of hay meadow of wildflowers in there. So the next plan was to, well, I tried plugs, but they didn't really work. Little plug plants in there, they can't really compete. So the other thing I did this spring was going back to the mypex. When that was cut down, I covered a strip with mypex, and it was only covered for like maybe 2 months or even 6 weeks, and then I took it off, and the grass is all dead, and it's probably some roots in there, but it's knocked back, and then I just ran over it with my little 1 horsepower cultivator, which I'll show you later, and just to scratch the surface a bit, take it down, you know, just scratch it through to about 2 or 3 inches, and then I sowed that with a wildflower mix. So there's and I think the next picture's got what it came out like. So I think that's lovely. So I'm going to do a bit more of that next year. That's cornflowers, corn marigolds, and 2 or 3 other things. There's another picture of that a bit closer up to show you the flowers, which is quite nice. So that's what I'll be doing in my orchard. That's quite a new thing for me. I haven't really tried this sort of thing, and I'll see what happens when I cut it and see if they seed and they come back next year. So I think that's a kind of wrapping it up. I think I'll just finish with, there's a little picture of me with my 1 horsepower cultivator to finish up, and that's it really. I don't expect you to have a machine like that, but if you are taking the Mypex off and scraping it, you could just do it with a fork, or you could run a rotavator over it or something very lightly. But probably just a rake or a fork would be plenty. So I think that's about it. So I don't know if anybody wants to ask any questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Colin.
Okay.
A whistle-stop tour, and I guess you've got your own source of manure there as well, which is handy.
Well, he actually lives out all the time, so he's not in a barn, he's not in a stable or anything. So you'd have to go and get it.
True,
but I get manure from I get it from Plockton, from Alextown, and he's got quite a lot there.
There haven't been any questions popping up, just a few comments about saying how great it looks, and the meadow looks great as well. It's lovely. I think that's a brilliant idea. It was just when you were talking about yes, you go ahead with the slugs one.
Somebody says, how do you control slugs? Well, what I do, I don't really. I just hope that all the place is full of robins and blackbirds and things, and I just hope that they deal with it. And we have the only thing slugs in the cabbages. If they grow well, like I said with organic stuff, they grow vigorously. If you get a good strong plant out there, it can usually survive all that. They get a bit eaten by slugs. And then they usually can battle it and win through. The only thing with slugs that I do have a problem with is potatoes, and I have had some depressing years when quite a lot of them were full of holes. And I have tried this nematode, which you can get from various places. It's called Nema slug, the thing I use, and it's basically a microscopic microbe that lives in the soil, and it comes as a powder, and you mix it up with some water, and water it onto the area you've got the plants growing in, and they go into the soil and they munch up the slugs, and it seems to have helped a lot actually. It's a lot about timing. I mean, I think it's a lot about timing when the nematode can get going and in good time, but also, I think it lasts for about 6 weeks when you put it on. Do you wash your onions and trim the roots prior to tying and storing? Not really. When I pull them out of the ground, they've got that much roots on them, and I just leave that on, and that's enough. And I just tear off the top bit. That gives you, excuse me. That gives you enough to tie it in. I tie them in with, the traditional way, in a loop of string. If you have a loop of string, the perfect thing actually is the string you get off hay bales, which are already tied in a loop. And you tie them, you hang them up, and then there's a way I can't show you without a bit of string, but you just loop them round and you make a nice string, and I hang them up in the barn or the shed. It'll do fine. Well, that was another one there. What was that?
Sorry. So there was ones about potatoes as well. What varieties do you use, and how do you store them and stop the mice from eating them?
Well, varieties I use a couple of earlies. Pentland Javelin has been really good for me here, and Orla has been good. That's another one I use. This one here is Arran Victory. It's usually a compromise between the ones that are really nice and the ones that have a good crop. So the ones like Arran Victory I really like, quite very flowery, great for baking, but I don't get a great big crop off them. So those are nice. Things like Desiree are a good crop. They're not quite as nice, but they are pretty nice. But it's such a personal thing. Everybody's got different. I suggest you just when it comes to buying them, buy a small amount of lots of different things and keep track of which ones they are, and then try them and see which ones you like, and which ones do well. If they get eaten to death with slugs, then don't grow that variety again, or if they get blight or something, don't grow that variety again. and if you like them, grow it again. That's all really.
And about
what was the other question?
The storage.
Oh, storing, yeah. Well, I store them in sacks, Hessian sacks, and which they've got to have air through. Obviously, they've got to be out of the light, so they've got to be in a dark shed. And I've always stored them in the shed down in the garden there. And Hessian sacks are great. I found the easiest and cheapest way to do that is buy lengths of Hessian, which I think you can get in McGregor's, but I got some in a sale somewhere, cheap. But buy lengths of Hessian and then sew them into sacks. But yeah, I put them in the shed and they're fine. But the mice do have a go at them, and you get holes in the bottom, and they eat some of them, and they eat holes in them. And I have and I've tried putting them in the porch as well, but I lose a few to mice and things.
How long have you been using the no-dig method? I want to try, and friends say I need to dig the first year, then try no-dig second year. I
think I don't really know. I mean, I don't really do a sort of textbook no-dig. Some people actually, I mean, I do dig a little bit. I fork it over. I never get a spade and go over the whole thing. I did years and years ago. So starting out is difficult. I think if I was starting out, I would just start by covering the ground completely, leaving it. I would probably do, if you're doing it now, I would cover the ground in the next month or so and just leave it over the winter. And then come a nice day in March or April, take the stuff back, and you probably won't need to dig it. You can probably just fork it over lightly or loosen it a bit. But it depends what your soil's like.
Sorry, Colin. One of our previous hosts, Jake and Kate, well, two of them, Jake and Kate, over in Glenelg, they did a wee video about no-dig, which people can watch back as well. And I found it quite interesting. They had they just put the cardboard down and then covered it with some soil and some manure, and then just left it like you say. And then they suggested putting potatoes in for your first year, because that's what helps break up the soil.
I mean the thing is
different.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, I do dig a trench for my potatoes and put the potatoes in. I mean, the proper no-dig way to do it is to put the potatoes on the surface. I think you spread your dung on, you put your tatties on, and then you cover them with a great layer of straw or something like that. So they're not actually in the ground. They're just putting their roots into the ground, and you don't actually dig it. Now, I've never done that, but some people have had success. But I just, I say I don't dig it over, but I do dig trenches and put tatties in there, but something like onions, I wouldn't dig for that. What I do with that is I just uncover the ground, maybe spread some seaweed on it, and then just stick the onion sets in the ground. So it's kind of halfway no dig, really, I would say.
I think everyone finds what they work for themselves, isn't it? So
that's the fun of it, in a way, is that you're exploring. I mean, it's like, somebody just put up clay soil. They're saying, I said, well, it depends on what kind of soil, and I've got a clay soil here, which is quite unusual for the Northwest Highlands. It's usually much more acidic. Ours is much less acidic than most places around here. But having said that, 35 years ago, I used to garden in Bristol. And the clay soil there was a whole different ballgame. It was like, it would be, you couldn't walk on it over the winter, and then you had a margin of about a week where you could do something with it, and then it set like granite, and you couldn't do anything. So it's nothing like as bad as that. But, everybody's got, even within clay soil, there's different types of soil. So that's what I'm saying, really. So it's about experimenting and finding out what works for you, really.
Yeah, there's a few more questions popping up now.
Okay, go
on. Ewan is asking, he's saying, you mentioned a few varieties that grow well in these northern latitudes, such as cool birch apples. If I heard.
Oh, cool blush. It's called cool blush. Okay. Is the variety I was talking about.
And
that's the most northern variety.
if it would be possible to put a list together of some of the varieties that you're finding that grows well.
I've done that. Yeah, I could certainly. I've got a list that I've done of well, a kind of summary of all the apples I've grown. If you want, I can certainly email that around to everybody or something like that if you want.
Yeah, we can use the participant list of people that signed up to send it out.
Yeah, well, I had somebody asking me about apples just recently, and a while back I did compile a list of which ones I thought were best and so on. So I've got that ready, but again, it's quite likely. Well, the flavors are flavors that I like, and it might be different. I mean, even in the northwest, you get places like, where we are. You get a whole lot more frost if you go a mile up the glen. There's way more frost, so you want apples that flower later or whatever. Right down at the shore, it'll be a couple of degrees milder as well. So, even within the West Coast, there's a huge range of different situations. So it's all just a suggestion. All my things are just suggestions, really, and you have to work it out. But certainly, I've got a list of apples that I can send around everybody who wants it.
That'd be great, thank you. Now, Emma is asking about companion planting to help with the slugs.
Yeah, I have no experience of that at all, I'm afraid. But give it a go, see what works.
Yeah, we other events we've only sort of touched on the companion planting. I don't know if it's something that it's not a new theory, but I don't know.
No, not at all. No. Well, what I would say, a lot of the information I've got. I mean, I've got a few books, gardening books and stuff, but I'm a member of what's called Garden Organic now. Garden Organic is the prime sort of organic gardening organisation in the UK. And they do research. They started out in the 50s as a research organisation to find out what the best ways of doing all these things organically, because there weren't, the mainstream people weren't researching these things. So they started out like that. And they've, if you go onto their website or join them as a member, you get a magazine and everything, and you can write into them and say, how do I do this, or what's the best thing for this and whatnot. So they're a really good source of information, really helpful. So I definitely recommend them. I've been a member since 1982. So, I think it's definitely worth doing.
Very impressive. Now, a couple more questions,
and then
yes. Can you say again what it was that you put on the ground to stop the weeds coming through?
Well, I think it's called Mypex, M-Y-P-E-X. Now, I just bought it off the internet. You can probably buy it in garden centres and stuff by the roll. There's various. I think there's various makes. It's essentially what it is. They call it a membrane. It's basically a material which lets water through, so you're not drying the ground out, but it stops the light getting through, so any plants that are underneath just die. So it just basically clears the ground. And you'll get it in garden centres and things. I just buy a roll. Well, a couple of times I bought a roll of 50 meters and it's a 2 meter wide roll, so I can just put it across strips in my allotment. And you have to fix it down quite well if there's gales and stuff. What I do is I dig a spit of soil in the corners and put the Mypex into that, and then put the clump of soil on the top, so it kind of pulls it tight at the same time. And to do those at points all the way around it, and then it holds it down quite well.
How long do you store your seaweed for before using it?
Oh, I just put it straight on the ground. I just bring it straight up from the shore on a cart and put it on the ground and spread it on the ground. Well, I partly use it to protect the soil, because a lot of the soil on the allotment is bare during the winter, which is probably not good to be rained on bare soil. So it's quite good to cover it. If you're not covering with a membrane, then it's quite good to cover it with seaweed. So I just cover it with that, and then in the spring I either just plant through it or fork it in a little bit. But so yeah, it lies on the soil and rots there. Yeah, I don't think you need to worry about salt in it or anything like that, because the salt gets washed out very quickly if it's sitting at the top of the beach. It's not really a problem. And anyway, a bit of salt might help with slug problem as well.
And what time of the year do you do that?
Well, when the seaweed's there, which is, you start getting the storms in about November, and it all starts appearing on the top of the beach. There won't be much there now. I haven't looked recently, but there won't be much. January, you get heaps of it down there, and it's much easier to collect then as well, obviously. It's
probably been turned up a wee bit as well with the storms. So it'll be sort of
the storms the storms dump it all up at the top of the beach, and then it's ready to take away.
So you're not selective over what type of seaweed it is. It's just
no. I just take it all and it's mostly the same kind of stuff. I think it's bladderwrack or whatever it is. And it's sometimes a bit disappointing when you bring it up and you think you've got a big pile, but then a few weeks later it's dried off. It's all shrunk. But and it probably takes a year to rot as well. You find that it's still lying about on the soil. When I'm pulling up my onions, there's still bits of seaweed from January in among it, but that's fine. It'll rot down for next year. And if you do it every year, it's an ongoing process, and you're constantly adding those extra nutrients and a bit of organic matter to help the soil.
Okay, brilliant. Well, I don't know if anybody has any other questions that they would like to pop in just now. Yeah, there was just a comment there that you saw. Starting to use, I'm presuming it's the seaweed in the garden as well as just over the fence. I found it works well as a mulch, appears to help keep the slugs away as well as a fertilizer.
Yeah.
I think one of the previous events someone had suggested that when it goes crispy, they don't like the the sort of dryness.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think there was any research to back that up.
I don't know really. I don't know. Something just came into my head. Somebody was recommending recently, I haven't really tried it, but somebody was recommending sheep's wool for slugs. If you've got someone who's got sheep, or you can just pull it off the fences, pull it off a little bit if you want to put it around things that slugs don't like walking on it. So if you've got a particularly tender plant or something that you want to protect, apparently that's quite good for that.
Yeah,
I haven't really tried it, but
there's lots of things at the moment about sheep's wool, obviously with the price being so poor this year, that everyone's trying to find alternative uses for it. So yeah, it's been quite interesting to sort of read some of them about using it as a covering, to stop, I guess, nutrients leaching away, and using it as a pat instead of like putting it down on a path and then stones on top. Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you very much for putting up with the technical difficulties at the start.
Well, thank you for sorting it. Yeah.
Any last tips or comments?
Nothing I can think of anyway.
Just go for it. What can go wrong? Just try, isn't it?
Yeah, and don't. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their own ways of doing things, and I've been doing it for decades, like I said, and there's still some things that I can't really grow. I just have problems with them, and sometimes like carrots for me are difficult, and it might be just the soil, who knows. So it's just give it a go, try it, and you get something out of it.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone's commented to say thank you very much. Lots of useful information there. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, and take care, everyone.